The first time HOA Karen tore down my farm road at full speed, I didn't hear her car so much as I felt it. The ground vibrated, the air thickened, and a wall of dust rolled toward my house like a warning shot. This wasn't a mistake, and it wasn't impatience. It was entitlement in motion, reckless and loud, cutting straight through land that did not belong to her. My farm had always been quiet, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones and reminds you why you left the city behind. That quiet died the moment her tires hit my dirt road like it was a personal shortcut carved just for her convenience. I stood there watching the dust hang in the air, already knowing this wouldn't be the last time. People like HOA Karen never test a boundary once. They test it again and again until something breaks. And this time it was my piece on the line. Before we move forward, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? That road wasn't public, no matter how much she acted like it was. It was a long, narrow dirt stretch running through my property, legally a private easement, maintained by the people who respected it. For years, everyone who used it drove slow, because that's what you do when kids play nearby, and animals spook easily. We understood that dust wasn't just annoying, it was dangerous, blinding, and disruptive. That shared understanding vanished the day HOA Karen decided the fastest route mattered more than anyone else's safety. The first pass could have been written off as ignorance if she had slowed down the next time. She didn't. She came back faster, louder, and with the confidence of someone who had already decided nothing would happen to her. I tried to stop her the next time I saw the silver blur coming. I waved her down, stood right in the road like a fool who still believed in talking things out. When she finally stopped, I explained calmly that it was private land and that we kept speeds under 10 miles an hour. I talked about kids, animals, dust, and safety, all the things reasonable people understand instinctively. She listened just long enough to make sure I was finished. Then she scoffed, rolled her eyes, and told me this was the fastest way to the highway. She said if I didn't like dust, maybe I should pave my little path, and then she sped off again, deliberately, spraying dirt in my face as if to punctuate the insult. That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with someone who believed access meant ownership. HOA. Karen didn't see a private road. She saw an inconvenience that existed solely to be ignored. From that day on, my farm became her racetrack. Morning, afternoon, sometimes twice within an hour, the Lexus would come screaming through. My polite wave turned into a glare. She didn't even look at me anymore. She didn't have to. In her mind, she'd already won. I put up signs next, clear ones, stating private road and slow down. They disappeared overnight like they'd never been there. I strung a simple rope barrier, not to stop a car, but to make a point. She drove straight through it without braking, snapping it like thread. The message was unmistakable. She wasn't just ignoring boundaries. She was daring me to enforce them. Every pass sent my animals into a panic. Every dust cloud coated my house. Every burst of speed made me pull my kids closer without explaining why. By then, the tension wasn't just annoyance anymore. It was a countdown. I could feel it every time the road went quiet, knowing the silence meant she was coming back again. This wasn't about convenience or shortcuts anymore. It was about dominance. HOA. Karen had decided my land was hers to use, and she was going to keep using it until someone stopped her. Standing there, watching the dust settle, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. If I didn't end this on my terms, it was only going to get worse. Before HOA Karen ever decided my road was her personal drag strip, there had been an unspoken agreement among everyone who lived nearby. The dirt road wasn't fancy, it wasn't wide, and it certainly wasn't designed for speed, but it worked because the people who used it understood what it was, and where it ran. It cut through working land, not empty scenery. Kids rode bikes near it, animals crossed it without warning. Dust hung low if you pushed it too hard. Respect wasn't optional, it was built into survival. That understanding held for years. Neighbors waved, drivers slowed. Nobody needed reminders or enforcement because the land itself demanded care. You didn't race through a place where livestock grazed and families lived. You didn't treat a private easement like a shortcut just because it shaved a minute off your commute. The road existed because people cooperated, not because someone in an office said it could. HOA Karen never learned that distinction. When the subdivision went up nearby, it came with curbs, asphalt, manicured lawns, and a homeowners association that trained people to think rules were something you used against others, not something you followed yourself. To her, authority wasn't about responsibility. It was about leverage. And once she became comfortable wielding that leverage inside of her neighborhood, she started carrying it everywhere she went. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't ask permission. She didn't even pretend to acknowledge that the road cut through land that wasn't hers. From the moment she started using it, she acted like convenience alone granted her access. Fast access, unrestricted access. The kind of access that ignores posted signs, snapped ropes, and human beings standing directly in the way. I tried to de-escalate early, because that's what you're supposed to do. I tried conversation. I tried patience. I tried explaining things that shouldn't need explaining to an adult. Every attempt bounced off the same wall of arrogance. HOA Karen didn't hear concern. She heard challenge. And challenge, to someone like her, isn't resolved. It's crushed. Her confidence wasn't loud at first. It didn't need to be. It showed up in how she ignored me after that first conversation, and how she sped up instead of slowing down, and how she never once looked embarrassed or apologetic when dust coated my house, or animals scattered in panic. She drove like someone who had already decided she was untouchable. I escalated the way the system tells you to. I documented. I called the sheriff. An officer came out, listened, and did what he could. He spoke to her. He warned her. For one day she behaved, just long enough to prove she could. The next day she was back, sometimes even faster, like the warning itself offended her. The message was clear. She wasn't confused. She was defiant. When I followed up, the explanation came wrapped in limitations. Private road. Civil issue. Enforcement is tricky. Court would take time and money. The words landed heavy because they translated to the same thing in the end. You're on your own. The system that should have protected my land and my family wasn't built for situations like this. It was built to process paperwork, not stop entitlement with momentum. That's when I understood the imbalance I was dealing with. HOA Karen lived in a world where consequences were abstract. Tickets could be argued. Complaints could be buried. Time and money were tools she had more of than most. Meanwhile, every day she used my road like a racetrack. The cost landed on me immediately. In dust. In fear. In the constant need to watch and wait. Her authority didn't come from law. It came from assumption. From acting like she belonged everywhere she went and daring anyone to stop her. That confidence was the real problem. Not the car. Not the speed. The belief that nothing would ever push back hard enough to matter. Standing there, after yet another dust cloud drifted through my yard, I realized that belief was the only thing keeping her behavior alive. And once that belief cracked, everything else would fall with it. HOA Karen's behavior didn't exist in a vacuum, and that was the most dangerous part of it. She wasn't just a reckless driver cutting through my land. She was a product of a system that taught her how to take without asking, and how to keep taking once no one stopped her. The homeowners association she ruled over had conditioned her to believe that authority was portable, that once you were used to compliance in one place, you deserved it everywhere else too. My farm wasn't outside her worldview. It was simply unclaimed territory. Every time she sped down that road, it wasn't impatience pushing her foot harder on the gas. It was confidence. Confidence built by years of committees backing her, neighbors deferring to her, and rules being enforced selectively in her favor. She was used to complaints dissolving into paperwork, to objections turning into delays, to resistance exhausting itself long before she ever had to change. That mindset doesn't stop at a subdivision entrance sign. It spills outward until it hits something solid. The abuse wasn't loud in the beginning. It was repetitive, predictable, almost methodical. Speeding once can be brushed off. Speeding twice raises eyebrows. Speeding every single day becomes a message. She was training me to accept it, training my family to live around her behavior, training the land itself to be something she could dominate through repetition alone. That's how power works when it's unchecked. It doesn't announce itself as abuse. It normalizes itself until fighting back feels unreasonable. Her husband's response said more than any argument ever could. Happy wife, happy life wasn't a joke. It was a surrender. a quiet admission that everyone around her had learned the easiest path was avoidance, not confrontation. That attitude protected her better than any rule book ever could. If the people closest to her wouldn't challenge her, why would a stranger on a dirt road succeed where they had failed? The sheriff's limitations reinforced it further. Private road, civil issue, long process, expensive court. Every explanation, no matter how polite, translated into the same outcome: delay, distance, attrition. HOA. Karen didn't need explicit permission to keep going. She thrived in the space where enforcement hesitated, where responsibility blurred, where consequences took too long to matter. Meanwhile, the damage stayed immediate. Dust didn't wait for court dates. Fear didn't pause for legal clarification. My kids didn't get to suspend their instincts while the system decided whose problem this really was. Each time the Lexus roared past, it reinforced the same imbalance. Her inconvenience was hypothetical. My risk was constant. That difference was the engine driving everything. She never once checked to see if anyone was watching. She didn't need to. In her experience, being watched never led to consequences. It led to complaints. Complaints led to meetings. Meetings led to nothing. So she kept going. Faster, louder, more often. Not because she was angry, but because she was comfortable. That comfort was the real abuse. The way she treated my land like a resource to be consumed and discarded. The way she treated my warnings like background noise. The way she treated safety as something other people worried about. Standing there after yet another pass, watching dust settle on my porch, I finally understood the structure I was up against. HOA. Karen wasn't powerful because she was aggressive. She was powerful because she believed no one would ever force her to slow down. And as long as that belief held, the road would never be safe. The solution didn't arrive in a flash of anger or some late-night spiral where frustration finally snapped. It came quietly, almost accidentally, the way real decisions tend to show up when you've exhausted every polite option, and the noise finally clears enough to think. One afternoon, I was in the old barn, clearing out decades of forgotten tools and rusted parts that had belonged to my grandfather when I found the box. It was heavy, stained with oil and dust, and it felt older than memory itself when I dragged it into the light. Inside were thick, rusted metal strips from an old farm harrow, the kind used to break up stubborn soil before planting. They were bent, ugly, and worn down from years of honest work. I picked one up and felt its weight in my hands, and for the first time in weeks, my thoughts slowed. These weren't weapons, they were tools, and tools, when used correctly, solve problems without speeches or permission. I didn't jump to the idea immediately. That matters. The line between retaliation and responsibility is thin, and I was careful not to cross it. I didn't want anyone hurt. I didn't want lawsuits. I didn't want a dramatic confrontation that could spiral out of control. What I wanted was simple and very specific. I wanted speeding to stop. Not eventually, not conditionally. Immediately. That clarity shaped everything that followed. I wasn't looking to destroy a car or endanger a life. I was looking to make reckless behavior carry instant consequences. Consequences that were proportional, predictable, and impossible to argue with after the fact. Speed had been her weapon. Speed would be the thing that betrayed her. I spent the next few hours thinking through every angle, not emotionally but practically. What could be done on my own property? What wouldn't violate any law? What wouldn't leave obvious evidence or create new risks? I wasn't improvising. I was planning. The difference between the two is what keeps you out of trouble. That's when the idea fully took shape. Not spike strips like police use. Nothing that aggressive or obvious. Something simpler. Something low-tech. Something that only mattered if you were moving too fast. I drove to the hardware store and bought a box of 3-inch deck screws, the kind meant to hold real weight. Back at the barn, I took sturdy wooden planks and drove the screws through from one side so the sharp points protruded cleanly on the other. Not jagged, not chaotic. Uniform, controlled. They weren't designed to shred tires instantly. At slow speed, they'd barely matter. At reckless speed, they'd do exactly what physics dictates. That distinction mattered more than anything else. It meant the trap wasn't random. It was conditional. Behavior determined outcome, just like it should. The next step was observation. I didn't guess where to place them. I watched. HOA. Karen had a habit, and habits leave patterns. She took the same racing line every time, cutting slightly to the inside, hugging the smoother section of road she'd worn down herself over weeks of abuse. That line told me everything I needed to know. Predictability is the quiet weakness of entitlement. I waited until late that night, when the road was empty and the farm was still. Under the cover of darkness, I dug shallow trenches across that exact path, only a few inches deep, enough to hide what needed hiding. I laid the planks sharp side up, spacing them carefully, then covered them with loose dirt and smoothed everything out until the road looked untouched. From above, from a driver's seat, from any casual glance, nothing had changed. That was the point. There were no signs, no warnings, no drama, just a road that responded honestly to the way it was used. I stood there for a long moment after finishing, listening to the quiet settle back in, knowing the next move wasn't mine anymore. The proof was set. All that remained was to see whether HOA Karen would do what she'd done every single time before. Morning didn't rush in after the trap was set. It arrived slow and ordinary, like nothing important was about to happen, and that contrast made the waiting heavier. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the farm wake up the way it always had before HOA Karen ever discovered my road. Birds moved through the trees. The air stayed clear. No dust yet. No engine noise. The quiet stretched just long enough to make me wonder if, for once, she might take another route. Then I heard it. Not close at first. Just the faint whine of an engine being pushed harder than it needed to be. The sound crept in over the hill, familiar enough that my stomach tightened before the car even came into view. HOA Karen never varied her timing. She never varied her speed. Consistency was her tell, and it betrayed her perfectly. The silver Lexus appeared at the crest of the road, already moving too fast, already throwing dust behind it like a signature. She didn't slow. She never did. She hit the first buried plank before her brain could register that anything was wrong. There was a dull, heavy thump, not loud enough to sound catastrophic, but sharp enough to feel final. A split second later, the second plank answered it. The sound carried across the open land, followed immediately by the unmistakable wobble of rubber losing its integrity at speed. The car lurched hard to one side as the front tires began to deflate, almost instantly. HOA Karen slammed the brakes. Not smoothly, not in control, but in pure reflex. The Lexus skidded sideways, dust exploding upward in a chaotic cloud that swallowed the road and erased whatever confidence she'd been carrying seconds earlier. When the vehicle finally stopped, it sat crooked in the middle of the road, like something that had failed a basic test of physics. I didn't move right away. I let the moment breathe. From the porch, I watched her door fly open and saw her stumble out, heels sinking into loose dirt as she spun in a tight, frantic circle, trying to understand what had just happened. Her face went from confusion to rage in the span of a heartbeat. She crouched down, saw both front tires collapsed flat against the rims, and let out a shriek sharp enough to scatter birds from the nearby trees. That sound was different from anything she'd made before. It wasn't irritation. It wasn't annoyance. It was the sound of someone realizing they were suddenly vulnerable. I walked down the driveway at an unhurried pace, making no attempt to hide the calm on my face. When she saw me coming, she straightened up like she'd found her target. Her finger shot out, shaking with fury, as she pointed straight at me. "You did this!" she screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of certainty she couldn't back up. She said she was calling the police. She said she was going to sue me. She said I'd pay for this. I listened without interrupting, letting her words pile up until they tripped over each other. When she finally paused, I tilted my head slightly and asked what she meant. I told her it looked like she'd hit something sharp. I said the road wasn't in great condition and I'd been meaning to grade it, but it was hard to get work done with people speeding through all the time. I mentioned almost casually how lucky it was she hadn't been driving any faster, how dangerous that could have been, how someone could have gotten seriously hurt. Each sentence landed clean, precise, impossible to argue with without admitting exactly what she'd been doing. Her face changed then. The red drained out and was replaced by something tighter, something closer to panic. She knew. She knew exactly what had happened and why. But knowledge without proof is useless, and she had none. No visible spikes, no warning signs, No witnesses to anything illegal. Just a dirt road, 2 destroyed tires, and her own history of reckless behavior. The tow truck took hours to arrive. When it finally did, the driver took one look at the road and charged extra for the off-road recovery. HOA. Karen argued with him too, but it went nowhere. Money changed hands. Time drained away. Neighbors who had never acknowledged the situation before slowed as they passed on the public road, curiosity finally outweighing avoidance. Her collapse wasn't loud anymore. It was slow, public, and humiliating. I watched the entire process from my porch, coffee long gone cold in my hand. When the Lexus was finally hauled away, it left behind deep ruts and silence. Real silence this time. The kind that doesn't feel like anticipation. HOA. Karen never looked back at me as she left. She didn't need to. The confrontation was over. The collapse was complete. What followed wasn't a dramatic escalation, and that was the part HOA Karen never anticipated. She had built her confidence on the belief that every conflict could be inflated, argued, or buried under paperwork until the other side gave up. This time there was nothing to inflate. No shouting match. No threats that stuck. No authority to hide behind. Just consequences that didn't require permission to exist. She did call people afterward. Not me. She didn't dare. She called the sheriff again. She called someone at the county. She probably called her HOA board expecting sympathy or backup. None of it mattered. The answers were the same every time. Stripped of tone and delivered without emotion. Private road, private property. No evidence of wrongdoing. No injured party willing to press charges. The system she was used to leaning on didn't bend in her favor anymore because there was nothing for it to grab. That was the retaliation, and it was expert precisely because it wasn't loud. Nothing moved forward, and nothing moved backward. Her outrage had nowhere to land. The law didn't punish her for speeding on my road, but it didn't punish me either for owning it. The trap didn't violate statutes. It didn't announce itself. It didn't discriminate. It responded only to speed. That simplicity made it unassailable. From that point on, every option she had involved inconvenience. The public route to the highway was longer, slower, filled with other drivers and actual speed limits, cameras, patrols, accountability. Each time she chose that route, she paid in minutes and frustration instead of dust and dominance. That was the shift. Her behavior stopped affecting me and started affecting her. I didn't need to rebuild the trap. I didn't need to leave it in place forever. The message had already landed. She understood exactly what would happen if she tried again. Speed had betrayed her once, publicly and expensively. People like HOA Karen don't need repeated lessons. They need one lesson that costs them personally enough to be remembered. The farm responded faster than any institution ever could. Within days, the animals relaxed. They stopped flinching at distant engines. The dust stopped settling on every surface. My kids stopped asking if it was safe to play near the road. Those changes didn't require validation or approval. They were proof that the threat was gone. HOA. Karen's authority shrank in real time once it left the environment where it had been artificially inflated. Out on a public road, she was just another driver. On my land, she was just another trespasser who had learned better. The expertise wasn't in building the trap. It was in knowing when to let consequences do the talking and when to stop engaging altogether. She never confronted me again. Never sent letters. Never tried to negotiate or threaten. Silence replaced arrogance, and avoidance replaced entitlement. That was the real retaliation, not damage, not drama, just removal. The kind that leaves no room for appeal. The road didn't celebrate when HOA Karen stopped using it. It didn't need to. It simply returned to what it had always been before she decided it was hers. Quiet settled back into the dirt the way water finds its level, slow and unquestioned. Days passed without engines screaming over the hill. Weeks went by without dust rolling towards the house. The absence became permanent, and permanence was the only victory that mattered. My kids didn't ask anymore if it was safe to play outside. They just did. The animals stopped reacting to every distant sound like it might turn it into chaos. The porch stayed clean long enough that I stopped noticing it. The land healed itself the moment the pressure was gone, as if it had been waiting patiently for someone else to leave it alone. HOA. Karen didn't get a final confrontation. She didn't get a speech or a warning or a dramatic ending where she stormed back to reclaim something she never owned. She took the longer road every single time after that. The public one. The one with rules she couldn't rewrite and consequences she couldn't intimidate away. Her world shrank back to its boundaries, and mine stopped being invaded. No one in the subdivision ever brought it up. They didn't have to. People like HOA Karen don't vanish loudly. They fade when they realize the space they tried to dominate no longer responds to them. Entitlement collapses fastest when it's ignored, when it finds no leverage, no reaction, no audience willing to play along. The trap didn't need to stay in the ground. It had already done its work. The lesson wasn't hidden under the dirt anymore. It lived in her behavior, in her absence, in the way the road stayed empty no matter the time of day. Speed never came back, because Speed had learned it wasn't welcome. I didn't gain anything new from the situation. I didn't expand my land. I didn't change my routines. I didn't become someone else. I simply got back what was mine to begin with. Peace isn't something you win. It's something you restore when someone finally stops taking it. HOA Karen never tried it again. That was the end of it.